Welcome to the Geschmack of our podcast. This is episode 29. Feel free to send this episode around. We are a couple listens away from our 1,000th listen. Feel free to please give us a 5-star review. It really helps the podcast out. It helps Apple's algorithm to how the podcast gets suggested to people. If you give it a 5-star review and also write something. But anything that you do to help this podcast out is much appreciated. We are about to, believe it or not, enter the month of Elul. This Sunday and this Shabbos is Shabbos Mevorchim for us to embark on our journey through Elul, the Elul Zman, the month of Elul. And we know that in order to take out the most benefits from a davar shebekdusha, it takes hachana, it takes preparation. There's a halacha that we should gather our thoughts and take a couple minutes before we daven shachris, mincha, or mariv in order to step in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with proper kavanah. That takes hachana, it takes preparation. There's different musar ideas and understandings that before any mitzvah, we say a hineni muchan, a preparation, a little bit of a tefillah to help us get our kavanah intact. And of course, we have to do this for an entire month of Elul, which is a time leading up to Rosh Hashanah and to eventually Yom Kippur, a time where HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us specifically a specific time of where He's close, that we can grow by leaps and bounds to shtag and to grow closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'd like to share over a quick idea, a quick story, and perhaps an idea that can help us all to be mechazek and to strengthen our avoda in Elul. It's based on a shmooze given by Rabbi Ephraim Waxman, the Maggid Shlita. And he starts by describing an interesting scenario where you grab your family and you go on a vacation, you take off on a flight, Florida bound, let's say. And as you're flying, you reach 10,000 feet, the captain turns off the fasten seatbelt sign, and you are free to move about the cabin. And we don't feel it, but most planes can travel at a speed up to 500 miles an hour. And we're just sitting there. We can even put our seats back and eat something, drink something, and all the while we're moving 500 miles an hour. But when do you feel that you're actually going, oh, I'm going really, really fast? That's when there's some turbulence in the air. When the plane hits an air bubble in the air, the plane starts to shake, and all of a sudden you remember, oh wow, we really are traveling fast. And the psychology behind that is because when we're moving so fast, you don't feel it, but when the plane starts to shake, when you have a little bit of turbulence, you start to gain connection to what's really going on, then you refocus and you understand what's going on. It's safe for us to assume that this past year, this past Shana, was a time where we bumped into some turbulence. Kalas got married. We don't like to reminisce about it, but Kalas got married in their driveways. Businesses close to crumbling, and Hashem has saved many of them. People stuck at home with relatives, sometimes too close to home or too much time at home, but it's safe to say that we've all shared our own amounts of turbulence. And what happens is when we have this turbulence, we start to feel how fast we've been going. We've been speeding through life. Sometimes life has been speeding through us. But either way, with a ragilos, with a second-naturedness, with a teva sheni, with how we just wake up and do as we do, enjoy life, live happy lives, do avodas Hashem, but yet almost half asleep. But whether it's good or whether it's bad, turbulence wakes us up. How often does a person have a time to say, Machay vasi ba'ilami? I have a job in life. We know that we wake up to do mitzvahs. We wake up to learn Torah, to work on our midas. Kihi chayecha. Our midas is the reason we wake up in the morning. I implore you to look at the Vilna Gaon's Pshat in Parak Dalid, Pasuk Chav Beis, I believe it is, in Mishlei. about what Shlomo HaMelech tells us. The reason we wake up in the morning is to perfect our midas. Midas is why we wake up in the morning. Because it all leads to our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How often do we get a chance to say, Avodas Hashem, this is probably the wrong way to say it, but Avodas Hashem for dummies. To boil it all the way down to say, well, what am I doing? Ma'achay vasi ba'ilami, what's my job? Mitzvahs are important, Torah is important. But what's my job in the world? Reb Elchanan Wasserman Shlit, Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh Livracha, the Rosh Yeshiva of Baranovich, the famed Torah giant, who was the Talmud Muvak of the Chavetz Chaim, flew to America to fundraise funds for his yeshiva. An individual told him that there's one wealthy Gvir in town who can solve all your financial problems, but he's not known to give a lot of money away. When he made the trek to this office, to this fancy high-rise building in the Lower East Side, he knocks on the door and he notices that the last name is Wasserman. And he has a moment to think, well, maybe this is my friend, maybe this is my family. He opens the door, and sure enough, Philip Wasserman, Reb Elchanan's long-lost cousin. I remind you, this is a true story. And he says, oh, look, this is me. I'm Elchanan. Remember, we were friends back in when we grew up in the shtetl, back in Europe. We were friends. We're cousins. How's it going? Please come in. And Mr. Wasserman ushers him in, ushers in the Rosh Yeshiva. And they sit down and they start to schmooze. So how's it going? And Reb Elchanan tells him, well, I opened the yeshiva and I learned by the Chavetz Chaim. Oh, wow, unbelievable. What are you up to? Mr. Wasserman tells him that I've actually started, when in America, I started to sell garments. And then I eventually had enough money to buy a sewing machine. And after I had enough money to buy a sewing machine, I started to sew my own garments and sell them at a faster pace. And eventually I got 3 sewing machines, and then I hired a bunch of workers. And now I have a factory of more than 300 workers. And Baruch Hashem, I am a very wealthy, successful man. And Reb Elchanan tells him, unbelievable! Such bracha. And Mr. Wasserman tells Rabbi Wasserman, what can I do for you? And the Heilige Rosh Yeshiva, Reb Elchanan, says, I just came to say hello. Came to see a long-lost cousin. And Baruch Hashem, I'm so happy that you're doing well. And Mr. Wasserman tells him, that's it? I mean, you came all this way just to say hello? I mean, obviously. And Reb Elchanan says, yeah, Taka, I just wanted to say hello. And he says goodbye, and he leaves. So Reb Elchanan keeps getting messages from this guy, and obviously from his employees and different letters. Obviously, come back the next day. He says, come back to. Obviously, you can't just be there. That's all you wanted to say hello. I want you to come back. And Reb Elchanan comes back to see Mr. Wasserman the next day. And Reb Elchanan, as he's sitting there, he walks in, and Mr. Wasserman tells him, that's all you came for? Obviously, you came for much more. You came all the way from Europe on a boat just to be able to come say hello to a long-lost cousin? And Reb Elchanan tells him, you know what, you're right. Really, I came for something more. I came because, you see, this is the frock that I've been wearing my jacket, and a button's missing here, and I'd really help, or I'd really, really like it if you can sew this button and make it better for me. And Mr. Wasserman looks at him and says, you came all the way for this? You didn't come here just to be able to sew the button back on? And Reb Elchanan tells him, Pinchas, Philip, you think your neshama came all the way from underneath the Kisei HaKavod? Your soul came all the way from Shemayim down to this world, was fashioned in a body, and all you were created for, you think was just to sew buttons onto coats? There's much more to life. And this Pinchas started to cry. Started to say, Reb Elchanan, will you learn with me? Will you help me? And sure enough, he was machzer b'tshuva. The reset button sometimes needs to be pressed. Mitzvahs are important, midas are important. That's the way that we can connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But sometimes we need a reset button. Ma'achay vasi ba'ilami. I have a neshama, there's a point in life. How can I work on my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? We're not here just to sew buttons on to jackets. There's a reason that we wake up in the morning. Elzman, going into the month of Elul, a hachana, perhaps we can suggest is just to be able to take a deep breath. That the future starts with now. Think into the actions and the things that we do. Is my Kriya Shema with Kavana? Do I say the first bracha of Shemona Esrei with a Pirush HaMilim? Do I know what the words translate as? Do I learn 15 minutes of Musar a day? Do I know basic halacha, basic Mishnah Berurah? Am I nice to my parents? There's so many things that are Dvarim Pshutim that are Amkus HaPashtas, are Amkus HaPashtas. There's so much depth in the simplicity, but do we do it? Let us take this couple days before Rosh Chodesh Elul to hit the reset button so that we can go into Elul saying, I have a month and a little bit of time to be able to be mechazik myself, to be able to stand in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and be able to say, Hashem Hu Elokim. Let us all be zeicher to have a steigful and a beautiful month of Elul full of much, much growth.